Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trailokyam Sacharacharam, Tat Padam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva, Tvameva Bandhu Cha Sakha Tvameva, Tvameva Vedyan Brahminam Tvameva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. My internal clock didn't go off.
Oh, you meditate for 25 minutes?
Yes. So where are we in our text? I think we're in the 10th chapter, are we not?
10th chapter, number 24.
Should I start?
Please.
Swaprabhatve bhavat vakyam manam yasmad bhavanidam advaitam bhyopeta yasmin sukham nasti ti bhashate. Your objection itself is evidence of the self-revealing nature of the existence of self-conscious non-duality. For you admit the existence of the secondless and merely contend that it is not bliss.
So what we're talking about.
I'm not sure that's the right one.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I read chapter 11. My bad.
We'll get there.
Katham tadrishmaya grahyam iti chainmaiva grihyatam sarva grahopasanshantao swayameva vashishyate. If you object, quote, how such a self could be grasped by me, end quote, our answer is, let it not be grasped. When the duality of the knower and the known comes to an end, what remains is the self.
Yes. So again, we talk about what this pratya vijnanam is, this realization in the intellect. So we're again talking about two kinds of knowledge. The perfect knowledge is the self-evidence of the self. Then there's this recognition that happens in the subtle intellect. When the mind drifts into samadhi, slips into samadhi, then when the mind returns, it's completely conditioned by this notion. There's nobody there. Now, listen carefully. whether we're going to talk about whether this is in Maya, is this real, yada, yada, yada. In the end, how can I phrase this? When the mind is gone, manonasha, even the realization I am Brahman is also gone. At those auspicious moments when the mind thunders to a complete stop. Even this recognition in the intellect is gone. Only the self remains. What I think Vidyaranjan is driving at, in the end, there's no such thing as a realized person. If you think you're a person who has the idea, oh, I have got it now. Oh, yes, I am clear. All my doubts are gone. Who is the fool who's having all those stupid ideas? Not Brahman. So we go through this process. There is the recognition, the pratyabhijnana. And then even that.
So you're saying even the person who recognizes this.
But we have to be careful because we don't give up the idea I am Brahman before you've had the direct experience I am Brahman. Then you rationalize your suffering. Very careful about this. These are the kinds of doubts that are dealt with in Ashtavakra Gita or Avadhuta Gita. All right, subtle stuff. Next one.
Tatra manapekshyasti swaprakashaswarupatah tadrik vyupachya pokshat ched shrutim patha guror mukhat. Since Atman is self-luminous in its nature, its existence needs no proof. If you need to be convinced that the existence of Atman needs no proof, hear the instruction of the Shruti from a spiritual teacher.
Yeah. So what he's saying again, Atman is Swayambhu, self-evident. How do you know you are you? Now, if you need to be convinced of all this, then study with a guru, send your discrimination along the rails of thinking that are laid out in the Upanishads. Think in a particular way until you stop thinking. How do I ultimately stop thinking? When I'm convinced I am that Chidakash, that space of pure awareness. And no idea is real. When the mind itself is convinced of its own unreality. Then it quits grasping at understanding.
So then even the idea that it's self-luminous is a unreal idea.
If it's an idea,
Because I guess to say something is self-luminous, there needs to be the experience of it, of the opposite, I suppose.
well, no. When are you ever not self-luminous? There is no opposite to it.
Right. So which is why the statement might be meaningless in some ways, because if that is the only truth that we ever experience, that we are self-luminous. I guess to say.
So what is the state of mind of the ignorant person?
They're identified with their mind.
Do they think they're self-luminous? No, they think they have a backache.
Right.
They think they have a shitty boss who's mean to me.
Mm-hmm. So moving the attention to something that is true.
And then that in itself is an unreal thing. But because of it, it allows the mind to let go. Is that useful?
Yeah. So it's like a crutch.
Well, again, Shankari will use these things like the kataka nut powder in the water. Water's dirty, what do? Add more dirt. And in the end, you decant it, or the thorn used to remove the splinter.
Right.
Swamiji used to say it's a way of thinking that gets us outside of our thinking. But all of these do not define. We have to be very careful not to get caught up in literalism. They point, they do not define. And that's where getting caught up in these logical traps can be problematic. Although we are not the first. We're going back, 700 years, and Vidyarany's got a student who's wrestling with the same stuff. All right, going on. Oh, let me go back a second. So don't try to understand it. Go to your direct experience. In the end, you are an Upanishad. See if you can find a way to articulate your own direct experience. Don't try to wrestle with what the text says so much. Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
All right, going on.
Yadi sarvagrahatyago shakyastarhi diyam raja sharanam tadadhinonta bahirvaisho nubhuyatam. If you find the renunciation of all perceptible duality impossible, reflect on the intellect and realize the witness consciousness as the one witness of all internal and external creations of the intellect.
All right, this is a good one. So let's take the first part of it.
If you find the renunciation of all perceptible duality impossible.
Okay, so he's implying here, can you renounce all perceptible cognition? Draw from everything. Stop the mind. If that's impossible, and for some of us it is, then practice Sakshiva. What I am is the witness of all phenomena, most specifically, all mental phenomena. Never touches me. And Swamiji used to say the way to heal the mind is to get out of the mind. How do I stop my mind? Fundamentally by quit believing my mind. Only effective and necessary renunciation is to renounce the mind. That doesn't mean have a frontal lobotomy. It means to apprehend the fundamental unreality of the mind. Mind's nowhere standing. There is no such thing as the mind. And his thoughts attempt to try to arise. Next verse.
Should I read the next idea?
Oh, yes.
Reflect on the intellect and realize the witness consciousness as the one witness of all internal and external creations of the intellect.
That's what I think we just discussed. Then meditate on the intellect or in the intellect.
Reflect on the intellect.
Yes. So reflect that the intellect itself, which is just the movement of thought, have the idea, who am I? I am the witness of all internal and external movements. This is Sakshiva. Next one.
End of this chapter. Ekadashodhyaya Brahmananda Yogananda. Chapter 11, the bliss of yoga.
Okay.
Brahmanandam pravakshyami jnate tasmin shetatah ehi kamushmi karnarthvarat ehi kamushmi kanartha pratam hitva sukhayate. We now describe the bliss of Brahman, knowing which one becomes free from present and future ills and obtains happiness.
Yes. This Brahmananda. Now he's going to describe it. Going on.
Brahmavit paramapnoti shokam tarati chatmavet raso brahma rasam labdva nandi bhavati nanyatha. A knower of Brahman achieves the supreme. A knower of the self goes beyond sorrow. Brahman is bliss. One becomes blissful through the attainment of the blissful Brahman, and in no other way.
Yes. So, I used to have a lot of trouble with the word Ananda. My doubt was this: the self is Sat Chit Ananda. The self is changeless. I'm experiencing the self as the self, me, myself, all the time. I feel shitty. What's going on here? I'm always I always am. I always know, but I'm not always blissful. Whatever I think Ananda is, it can't be being happy. Because I'm not happy all the time. I'm not blissful all the time. What's going on? So we have to understand what we mean when we talk about Ananda. So this is how I have reconciled it all. In the beginning, I think the best definition of Ananda is no sorrow reaches there. Physical pain gets to my body, suffering gets to my mind, doubt gets to my intellect. But none of it touches me. But I'm not a feeling. I'm just the eternal witness. Why does Shankara talk, Chidananda Rupaham? What do they mean by my form is bliss consciousness? Oh, you start with no sorrow reaches there. And then what we understand is what the scriptures mean by bliss absolute. Is when the mind is in its projecting mode, its vikshepa shakti, the mind is agitated. That can be just low level rajas, restlessness, or it can be very deep pain, suffering. When I remove the vikshepa shakti, the mind, like the waves of the ocean, goes. And the mind becomes blissful when it is yoked to the self. It gets the Brahmananda rasa. It gets the juice of the bliss of Brahman. And we had in a prior class that Brahmananda rasa swad. Wasn't that the term we got?
Yeah.
Swad is taste. Tasting the bliss, the juice of the bliss of Brahman. For the ordinary person, experience it in two ways. At the moment of the satisfaction of a desire and in deep sleep. We call this the Anandamaya Kosha, the bliss sheath. Why? Because in the state of ignorance, I do not know that it is my self-nature. I think it's the objects. I don't even realize that what deep sleep is the absence of the projecting mind. But what the yogi, the jnani, understands is that's the mind coming home. That's why I'm so fond of this particular image. So Hanuman is a monkey, flying monkey. He's the mind. And if I remember the story, correct me. In the beginning, he doesn't know he's so powerful. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And then Ram shows him that he's really powerful. Is that how the story goes?
I think so. I don't really remember.
So we don't know how powerful our minds are. And it's like a flying monkey. It's like a monkey, but flying monkey. The mind can go anywhere. There's stories of, I love the one where Hanuman, he's supposed to get some herbs for Ram, and he forgot to ask what they look like. So he brings back the whole mountain. Powerful is the mind. Those who choose to study Raja Yoga develop all these incredible siddhis. We use such a little bit of what the mind is capable of doing. But like the monkeys, if you go watch the monkeys around the temples in India, they're grasping. You watch them go after the tourists' food. Isn't that my mind? Always hungry, greedy, grasping, nasty. Until it embraces self. Here's the self. This is where the mind finds its peace. I'm going to set it up here so we can see it for class. It's funny, this morning, just one of these synchronous things, I was listening to some music on YouTube on my phone. And I came across this gorgeous, very short little song by Rayfun Williams. It's called "Oh Taste and See." The lyrics are, "Oh, taste and see how gracious the Lord is. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him." Now they update the language. Blessed is the one that trusteth in God. So the idea of the tasting of the bliss, not the juice, so the scriptures say the self is bliss absolute, because when the mind is freed from its vikshepa shakti, from its rajas, and comes home to the self, so listen. And this is one of the great value of being able to hang with a man or woman of realization, because they can show us the awakened state of mind. When I was in India in 2015 with my friend Dave, I went to see his guru, Bhuvaneshwarana. Oh, what a wonderful man. He spoke English, but rarely spoke it. But little conversation he had was in Hindi. But who cared? Just to be there, tune up and tune in. Oh, so wonderful. So empty. Swamiji was like that. But this is this Brahmana Rasa, the juice. All right. Next verse.
प्रतिष्ठा विन्दते स्वस्मिन् यदा स्यादथ सोभयः कुरुतेऽस्मिन्नरन्तरं चेदथ तस्य भयं भवेत्. He who establishes himself in his own self becomes fearless, but he who perceives any difference from the self is subject to fear.
So, not only do I need to realize aham brahmasmi, that I am Brahman, and chidananda rupaham, my form is bliss consciousness. And what about this world? Brahma satyam jagan mithya. Brahman alone is real. The names and forms are fake news, an illusion, a hologram. Not nihilistic. It's all it's all old. How do I begin to experience this? Shankara says we need to have a mind like a sieve, or he actually uses the metaphor, a wicker basket with water pouring through. We have to practice letting all the sense perceptions, and most specifically, the things people say. That's pass. Not just the negative ones, positive ones. None of it is true. Let it pass. Not only do you not believe your own mind, but you don't believe anybody else's either. Nobody has the power to make me feel anything unless I let them. I let them because I'm a fool. So this is to meditate. All this comes about like a dream. All of this is nothing but Brahman. Sarvam Maya, Sarvamana. It's all Maya. It's all. Seeing the self in the world. No duality anywhere. Next verse.
Vayu suryo vahmirindro mrityu janmantareteram kritva dharmam vijananto yapsmad ditya charantihi. Even wind, sun, fire, Indra, and death, having performed the religious practices in earlier lives, but failing to realize their identity with him, carry out their tasks in fear of him.
Yeah. So the idea here is even the gods who have super egos may not have knowledge of the self, carry out tasks under the lash of kartavya, niyatam karmas, obligatory duty. Whereas the jnani, the jivan mukta, the stita prajna purusha, rests. Has nothing to accomplish, nothing to obtain, nothing to get rid of, nothing to achieve. It's given up all obligatory action. The equipment will have its product, but the jnani sees the BMI, the body, mind, intellect, the way you and I might see our shadow. It's there. It gets long, it gets short. The body moves through its worldly things. But it has nothing to do with peace. Now, sometimes the jnani has to be a good actor. That's all I'm going to say. May move through the world in a way where people do not really grasp a profound detachment. They wouldn't understand. Okay. They need to be a good actor. Next verse.
Anandam brahmano vidvan na bahibet na bidheti kutaschana etameva tapon naisha chitta karma grisambrita. One who has attained the bliss of Brahman experiences fear from nothing. Anxiety regarding his good and bad actions, which consumes others like fire, no longer scorches him.
Yeah. Now, mind you, it did not say he only does good actions. It says his actions, good or bad, do not scorch him. Self-realization is not a get out of jail free card. Doesn't mean at the level of body and speech. We don't experience the inevitable results of our actions. Sometimes, how can I put this? It is unlikely that the man or woman of realization will do things to hurt people. Why? Because over there is myself. That doesn't mean that they may not do something that hurts another. Because of the other person's reactivity or attachment, because of inadvertence, because of ignorance, Yeah. I promise you, you will do things that people will judge as good or bad. But the jnani is free from the scorching. It's such beautiful language. Oh, why did I do that? Will I ever stop doing that? Oh, I'm such a screw up. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I'm very. All that stuff is gone. Why? The body will move through the world according to its prarabdha. And the equipment, by definition, is finite. By and large, you're probably going to be much less of a jerk. Doesn't mean that other people aren't going to have judgments about your behavior. What's that party that Swamiji helped found? Is it VHP?
Yes.
What's it stand for?
Vishwa Hindu Parishad.
And how is it perceived today?
It's become more of a right-wing religious organization.
Yeah, a right-wing religious organization. Do you remember when it was founded?
I was too young. I think it was before I was born.
I think it was in the 50s, very early 50s. Anyway, Swamiji was one of the founders. And what I have been told is his idea, with many other religious leaders of the country, it was to found an organization, kind of a loose consortium of religious leaders whose purpose was to advise the secular government. Now, this is what, how many years later? 80 years later? 70 years later? Very different. And I actually had a friend slash student who said, well, Swamiji couldn't have been realized, or he wouldn't have founded this thing. Who's wanting to give up the Vedanta because it's being used in an unjust way to oppress Muslims. All these ideas, many of which are probably very valid. All I can say is I knew the man. And the self in him was the self in all. And he was incredibly empty. But will the world have praise and censure? Yep. But for the jnani, it makes no difference. Just the force of the past maturing. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Evam vidvan karmani tve hitvatmanam smaret sada krite cha karmani swatma rupe naivesha pashyati Such a knower through his knowledge takes himself beyond good and evil, and is ever engaged in meditation on the self. He looks upon good and bad actions done as the manifestations of his self.
Yeah. So again, I was having a conversation with a friend who's a Sufi, and she was asking me today, what do you think of the present circumstance? Does it upset you? Does it bother you? What do you think's going on? And she's wondering about astrology and what's happening. And people get into, is there a new age coming? Is the dark and the light fighting and all this sort of stuff? And I said to her, well, in my tradition, we don't see the world as created. It comes about like a dream. It's imagined. And it's ordered and it's intelligent and it unfolds according to cosmic law. And it's all unfolding as it should. What about Gaza and Lebanon and famine in Sudan? How could God want that? Well, I think most of those ills are what human beings have done to one another. Karma. So, what do? I try not to be a jerk. I try to be kind to other people. Try to bring a little bit of joy and peace in my little corner of the universe. And I leave the big picture to God. But I'm at peace. I hope I'm part of the solution, not part of the problem. There's never a good reason to worry, because none of it touches the self. I think it's of value to stay informed. Some yogis withdraw from the world completely, have no idea what's happening in current events. Swamiji was incredibly well informed, but he was also completely detached from it. Enormous compassion, and he thought the human condition was pretty funny. So the Jnani stands apart from this world. Master Jesus said, I am in the world, but not of it. And even more importantly, when we've talked about this Brahmana, he said, my kingdom is not of this world. There's another wonderful story of Jesus. But the only people he was ever critical of, it seems in scripture, were priests and hypocrites, and a Pharisee. Pharisee at the time was those people who were all into the 613 laws, what you should do and what you should not do, a very juridical approach to religion. And this Pharisee was trying to trap Jesus. And he said, should a man pay taxes? Above it, should you collude with the occupiers? That time, Judea was occupied by the Romans. Jesus, he was so funny. So he says, bring out the coin that's in your pocket. Of course, that was such a diss because an observant Pharisee was not supposed to carry anything that had the image of a person on it. Pharisee brings out a Roman coin. And then Jesus says, whose picture is on the coin? The Pharisee says, Caesar's. Then he says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and render unto God the things that are God's. So the yogi moves in the world as a responsible human being, but with no attachment, no real concern for it. How do I render unto God the things that are God's? Parama prema, supreme love of the infinite. Atmana. Next verse.
विद्यते हृदयग्रन्थि छिच्छन्ते सर्वसंशयाः क्षीयन्ते चास्य कर्माणि तस्मिन् दृष्टे परावरे. When a man has seen the highest, the knots of his heart are sundered, and all his doubts are dispelled, and all his actions perish.
So, when a person has realized their self-nature, the knots of the heart are cut asunder, the Hridaya Granthi, ignorance, avidya, craving, kriti, bhaya, fear, krodha, anger, arrogance, yanahata chakra. He's found the Chintamani, the wish-fulfilling gem. Jesus called the pearl of great price. Next.
तमेव विद्वान् तेति मृत्युं पन्था न चेतरः ज्ञात्वा देवं पाशहानि क्षीणै क्लेशैर्न जन्म भाव. Knowing him, one crosses death. There is no other path than this. When a man has known the effulgent self, all his bonds are cut asunder, his affliction cease, there is no further birth for him.
So, what is it that gets reborn? It's the subtle body, the antakarana, the sukshma sharira. For the ordinary person, the physical body drops away, the grosser part of the mind drops away, and the subtle body ascends. What's the subtle body? The 5 organs of action, 5 organs of knowledge, the prana, manas, mind, buddhi, intellect, chitta, the stuff of mind and memory, kriti, the ego sense, and the vasanas. And then you move to a more subtle, refined loka. You work out some of those unresolved karmas on those lokas. And then impelled by kama, desire, essentially with the question, what do I need to experience? How can I really be happy? You're impelled back into the physical. So what does knowledge of the self do? It ends the questions. How can I be happy? That driving force, I'll be happy when, it'll be better if, or better different, which impels the subtle body to another packet of sorrows. Cause of incarnation is gone. Now listen carefully. What if the scriptures are wrong? The subtle body comes back over and over again for eternity. Ark of the woman of the man of wisdom. They're no longer identified. So the Jivan perfectly willing to be in the body or be. What if all this stuff about some sort of individuality existing after death, what if it's when you die, you're dead? It's still the most intelligent way to live. With the dissolution of this personal sense of self, the becoming ceases in this very life. The movie changes, but the witness never does. Okay, next verse.
These are all quotes from Upanishads.
Right.
So last 4-5 verses. Devam matva harsha shokao jahat yatraiva dhairyavan nainam krita krite punya pape tapayata kvachit. Quote, the man of steady wisdom, having known the effulgent self, leaves behind even in this life all joys and sorrows. He is not scorched by thoughts of good or bad deeds which may have done or omitted to do. Katha Upanishad.
Yes. So again, another Upanishad quote which talks about the experience of the man of knowledge, the woman of knowledge. Let the body fulfill its prarabdha, the force of the past mature. Now, remember, what happens when the prarabdha is all burned up? You drop dead. But the mark of the person of steady wisdom is they've stepped out of the equipment, ever identified as the self. Their minds are yoked to that. Good question. So this is the Deepa, the lamp of yoga. Yoga means joined or united from the root yuj. What gets yoked to what? Some people think, oh, myself gets yoked to Brahman. Does the dreamer get yoked to the waker? It is the mind that gets yoked to the self. Hanuman embraces Lord Ram. That is you. Next one.
इत्यादि श्रुतयो भव्य पुराणैः स्मृतिभिः सह ब्रह्मज्ञाने नर्थहानि आनन्दं चाप्य दोषयन्. Thus, many texts in the Shruti, Smritis, and Puranas declare that the knowledge of Brahman destroys all sorrows and leads to bliss.
So he sums this up. Not only is it the experience of the great Mahatmas, gurus, but it is the promise that's put forth in the holiest of scriptures. Now, we Westerners have an advantage that many Indians do not have. That seems counter. This is the Vedanta, it's this deep Hindu tradition, born into it, you hear all about it. The pitfall is Indians have such a reverence for the Mahatma, for the realized soul. It's romanticized, it's placed on a psychological pedestal. Gurus are worshipped as gods. But one of the byproducts is many Indians will say, not me, not this lifetime. Maybe another 1,007 lifetimes, maybe they don't realize. Just try to read a little Gita, chant my mantra, not beat my wife. It's best I could do this lifetime. Westerners don't have this cultural impetus. Scripture is very clear. In Gita, Krishna says, easy to perform. Why not? So we don't have that doubt. Able to strive hard for liberation. without this preconceived notion that it's impossible. It is possible. Can happen. Don't let romantic superstition keep striving hard for liberation. All right, we'll end here. What verse are we on for next week?
Verse 11.
Verse 11 in chapter 11.
Yeah.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha.